The Justice Department is filing an antitrust lawsuit against Google. These cases represent the biggest challenge to date to Google's dominance in online advertising, its most lucrative domain. How did the politically powerful company end up in the crosshairs of federal regulators? The search for answers takes us to the dawn of the new millennium. That's when regulators were making their first major effort to rein in the power of big tech. And with some success. In 2002, the Justice Department won an antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft for monopolizing its market. Bill Gates offered an argument other tech titans would later echo.
We don't think this decision matches the reality of the high technology industry.
You see a new moment when federal regulators are willing to step up and pursue these cases.
Laura Phillips Sawyer researches the history of antitrust regulation at the University of Georgia Law School.
So this gives Netscape a moment to gain market share, and Firefox come online.
5 years later, state and federal antitrust enforcers accused Microsoft of failing to comply with the settlement. And this time, a tech insurgent named Google alleged that Microsoft's operating system was anti-competitive. Google complained it was unfair of Microsoft to only allow customers to do desktop searches using Windows software. Microsoft relented and allowed in rival search engines. But Google's own regulatory issues would soon emerge. In 2008, the Justice Department's Antitrust Division scuttled a proposed partnership between Google and Yahoo. Federal investigators said it would give Google too much power in online advertising.
And so regulators intervened and said, the subtext here is it looks like that this is going to disincentivize Yahoo from investing in its Yahoo search, which should be a competitor to Google search.
Yahoo struck a deal with Microsoft the following year to handle sales of search ads for both companies. But combined, Microsoft and Yahoo accounted for less than half of Google's share of searches. As a global tech behemoth, Google didn't only have to worry about U.S. regulators. In 2010, Google became the European Union's premier corporate target. The EU zeroed in on the company's core search and advertising businesses. The investigation would take years to unfold.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming.
In 2013, the FTC, which had spent nearly 2 years probing Google, decided not to bring charges. It concluded that there was insufficient evidence to support complaints that the 15-year-old company favors its own services in search results. Google agreed to make voluntary changes to its search practices.
With today's action by the FTC, Google can refocus on its business and its products, but with a clear understanding that it too must do so while competing fairly.
So the FTC decided against pursuing the case, but they did state very explicitly that they would keep an eye on this industry and they would return to it as the cases developed.
The following year, Google scored another victory. It reached a deal with European Commission regulators to tweak the way it presents search results. Google agreed to give rival services comparable prominence, but that wasn't the end of the story. Far from it. Just 3 years later,
we start with the breaking news that the internet giant Google has been hit with a record €2.42 billion fine for breaching EU competition rules.
The EU concluded that Google's search is dominant. And that meant Google was violating European law by putting its own product ads on top of search results from other sites that offered the same products. A little more than a year later, European regulators slapped Google with another fine. This time, the EU ordered Google to pay $5 billion for abusing the dominance of its Android mobile platform. Back in the US, big tech's political fortunes were also turning. A Republican-controlled White House and Congress viewed these companies' growing power, including in the marketplace of ideas, with suspicion.
And for you to come in here and say there is no political bias in Google tells us you either are being dishonest, I don't want to think that, or you don't have a clue how politically biased Google is.
Google's CEO since 2015, Sundar Pichai, staunchly refuted these accusations in his first congressional appearance.
I lead this company without political bias and work to ensure that our products continue to operate that way.
Google's most lucrative product, online advertising, kept on growing. Its annual ad revenue had surpassed $100 billion when the Wall Street Journal broke the news that the Justice Department was preparing an antitrust investigation of Google. Just a few months later, Google took another blow.
Today, 50 attorney generals from different states and territories are launching an investigation into Google's potential monopolistic behavior.
It was against the backdrop of these investigations that Pichai and his tech CEO peers testified remotely this summer before Congress. Pichai sounded a familiar theme.
New competitors emerge every day, and today users have more access to information than ever before. Competition drives us to innovate, and it also leads to better products.
Legal scholars observe that since the 1970s, antitrust enforcement has focused on harm to the consumer. How's the consumer affected by the cost of advertising?
I think it's going to be difficult to prove consumer harm. I mean, the way in which it could be done might be demonstrating that prices for advertising is higher, and that has some knock-on effects.
But experts say the cases against Google could signal a new era in enforcement and curtailing the power of big tech companies. A Google spokesperson said the company would continue to engage with ongoing investigations and that its services enable increased choice and competition.